Hi everybody. Tonight I want to talk about the difference between schooling fish and shoaling fish. So first I will talk about schooling fish. We use the term school and schooling much more commonly than we use the term shoaling, but more often than not we're using that term incorrectly. There's not very many freshwater fish that are actual schooling fish. Schooling fish are usually found in marine environments, and schooling fish are fish that swim in tightly packed groups in organized formations. They all turn at the same time, they all dip and dive at the same time, they move around like these bait balls you've seen. That's what a school of fish is, and very few freshwater fish behave to that degree of coordination. Shoaling fish, on the other hand, are fish like these red minor tetras that you can see in here. Cories would be considered a shoaling fish. Most neon tetras, most tetras are considered a shoaling fish. Most rasboras are shoaling. They're very common in freshwater. And what a shoaling fish is a fish that will tend to stay in a group but acts independently of any other individual in the group, and will even spread out unless it becomes threatened. And the only time they pack together tightly is under threat of predation, and then they will come together for defensive purposes. So if we actually take a look here at my red minors, or Serpé tetras, depending on what you prefer to call them, notice their behavior. They're all facing different directions. They're all just sort of hanging out at this end of the tank. We've got some that are down here away from the group. It's not uncommon at all to see one or two further down at this end of the tank. They don't necessarily stay in this tightly packed group, and they certainly don't all move as a single unit. They don't all shift at the same time. They don't all change directions in the same way at the same time. And they're also not very threatened in this tank. The angelfish tend to keep them packed a little more tightly than I have some of my other fish in some of my other tanks. But that's exactly where I'm going with this. I've got a few tanks that only have one or two neon tetras, for example, and I've had a few people make comments recently about how I should have more neon tetras or they won't behave properly and that sort of thing. So I want to talk a little bit about that. There is some truth to that, but it's like most things, it's not cut and dry, black and white. Now, if you've been watching any of these fish and you just single out one fish, they're not necessarily doing anything. They're not necessarily interacting with the other fish. They're just kind of sitting there. Well, this one's doing that. That one's doing this. You got these two down here that are interacting with each other. But it's not a real organized group. So let's imagine for a moment if I had one or two of these kept singly in a tank. And in fact, let's have a look at some neon tetras who do the same thing. I've got two neon tetras in this tank only because I had 18 and I now have 2 thanks to a hungry catfish that only comes out at night. Of course, neon tetras sleep very close to the bottom of the tank, so needless to say I'm down to 2 neons left. Now if you look at this neon, imagine if it had lots of neons all around it. It's either or, it doesn't matter. It's behaving exactly the same way those individual red minor tetras were. There is another fish in this tank because I know some of you are thinking, well, it doesn't have any choice but to be by itself in there. It's probably all stressed out and it wants to be amongst others. And that may be true, but there is another neon in this tank, and it's not palling around with it and huddling together like they're terrified. It's big and fat, its colors are bright, and it shows no sign of stress to me. Fish that live under constant stress tend to die very young. Neons don't live very long to begin with, so they won't last long if you've got neons that are under very stressful conditions. This is not a stressed out neon, even though it's being kept in this big tank with only one other neon. I don't even see the other one, honestly. There it is. It's in the back over here somewhere. I just saw it move past. See, there we go. But there's absolutely nothing in this tank that chases them around. I can't say there's nothing in here that preys on them. See, now they're together. Oh, I got 3 neons in this tank. I didn't realize that. So now they're together, and in a few minutes they won't be, and then they will be again. They're not stressed out. They don't need to be together. Now, if the tank was set up differently, and I had fish in here like the angelfish that are natural predators to the neons, the behavior might be a little different. So let's have a look at a tank that has angelfish and neons in it. So I've got 1 neon over here kind of swimming around. I got another one there. I've got some down here. That is not schooling behavior. That's shoaling behavior. It's a loosely knit group. They've even got other fish that will interact with them and group together. These white cloud mountain minnows often will interact with the neons. So while it is always nice to have multiple fish together, it's not always necessary. These skirt tetras here, these are genetically modified skirt tetras, but behaviorally they're identical. They're just skirt tetras. I have a tank upstairs that has 1 skirt tetra left in it, or possibly 2, the purple glowfish, and I think there might be 1 black skirt tetra in that tank still. I'm not sure, to be honest with you. But again, same kind of behavior. Look at them. Do you see them shoaling even? They're doing their own thing. They're at different parts of the tank. This one's swimming that way, that one's swimming the other way. These are not fish that really need to be together. If that fish was being kept by itself in a little 10-gallon tank, it would not be overly stressed out, unless, of course, you had a really aggressive fish in there that was nasty and attacking it and that sort of thing. But under those circumstances, the fish is going to be stressed anyway, and you've got the wrong kind of fish together. It's not the lack of companionship that's stressing it out. It's the aggressive fish in that scenario. So again, if you do keep them singly, it's not the end of the world. It's suggested to keep 4 or 5 of them together, 6 of them together. That's great. Watching them interact and everything is always fun. But they're not going to get stressed out and die. Now, I do have certain circumstances where I believe fish should absolutely be kept together. And we're going to come back to this tank in a minute, because those loaches on the bottom are going to be my next topic that we're going to discuss. But as we go down here to my black ghost knifefish tank, this tank has tiger barbs in it, and it's got Raspora hets in it, and it has glow light tetras in it. So if we look at the glow light tetras, we will see that they're scattered all over the place. You'll just sort of pick them out here and there, all over the place. Here, let me make an adjustment to the lighting here, and we'll be able to see in the tank a little better. I had the lid open this morning, and the light fixture slid towards the back. So now that we got it pulled forward again, it's nice and bright in there. So you can see everybody sort of swims around. They all intermingle. This is typical shoaling behavior. It's great that they're together. It's great that they're intermingling. But if you look over here, these guys are by themselves. They're doing their own thing. They're not really bothered by being in this tight group. That, again, is a school. This is a shoal. So in this tank, I've got tiger barbs. And if you'll notice, the tiger barbs do tend to stay pretty close packed together. They're in this cave system back here, and they will tend to stay tightly together. So the behavior I would get with them, I did have a few die off, and I got down to 3 fish. And in this particular case, only 3 of them in there meant that they did not have enough of their own kind to sort of vent their aggression, I'll say. They're a kind of fish that really sort of nips and chases, and they're not super aggressive, but they are kind of temperamental, and they do nip and chase and all that sort of thing. And if they've got a little group of themselves to do that amongst, they will do that amongst themselves and leave everybody else alone. So when I got down to 3 of them, I was getting a lot of harassing behavior towards the other fish in the tank. I was noticing that the tiger barbs were chasing the glow lights and chasing the Rasporas and just generally stressing the tank out and showing that aggressive, disruptive sort of behavior that indicated to me, in this case, it really is a good idea to have 5 or 6 of them together. I added some more back into the tank, and that behavior immediately went away, and the Tiger Barbs began interacting with each other again, and my tank went back to being nice and happy, and everybody's got their own little niche and fits in there where they belong. So again, it boils down to case-by-case scenario. There's no blanket statement that you have to have 5 neon tetras or they won't be happy in your tank, or you have to have a bunch of Corydoras or they won't be happy. If you've got a single Cory in a 10-gallon tank, it's not stressing that Cory out at all. If you've got 2, sometimes they'll hang out together, sometimes they'll be at other end of the tank. They do not need to be together. Now, going back to the 29-gallon tank we were just looking at down here, when I first started keeping fish, one of the first fish I bought was these striated or zebra loaches. Absolutely fantastic fish. But I only bought one of them, and I had no idea they were a gregarious fish. This is a grouping fish. It's not a shoaling fish, really. I guess you could call it a shoaling fish, but this is more of a fish that I think of as a grouping type fish. They can be kept singly, but the one I had, and I'm really reluctant to anthropomorphize animals, I don't want to humanize them by overlaying human emotions and human behavior and that sort of thing, but for lack of a better way of saying it, the one I had just seemed downright depressed. It lied on the bottom of the tank. It just slept all day. It was very inactive. It was very reclusive. It hid in caves. And I was really starting to think the thing was just going to die. It really looked like it was just going to die of loneliness. And I eventually did some reading, and I found out that that's a fish that's supposed to have a lot of companionship. They need at least 3 or 4 of them, and the more the merrier. So I found some online, and I actually purchased 5 more from California, actually they came from, and within minutes of putting them in the tank, and I mean that realistically, within 5 to 10 minutes of putting the new ones in the tank, my existing one perked up, began swimming around. You know, it was like I couldn't believe the change I saw. And so that was something I took very seriously. That was an animal that I realized needed to be kept with others. That is a gregarious animals. They need to interact with other of their own kind, sort of. This tank, I've got lots of these little skunk loaches, but I also have a single Angelicus loach in here, and the Angelicus loach does just fine because it interacts with the other loaches in this tank. There it is down there. And all of the interaction keeps it fine and healthy, and I don't feel like I need to have any more of these Angelicus loaches. As long as it's got some sort of similar fish companionship, these loaches seem to be okay. So again, you've got to pay a lot of attention to your animals. You've got to look at each individual behavior, each individual circumstance. Every single tank is going to be different. All of the tank mates are going to be different. And all of that plays a role in how you should be setting up your community. The final tank I want to look at is my native tank. This is the closest thing I have to what we will think of as a schooling fish, and it is my golden shiners. And let me walk over here a minute. If they see me moving around, they might think some food is coming, and we'll get a little bit of activity of them swimming around. And I want you to see the sort of schooling behavior. They all tend to move to one end of the tank or the other. It's really fun to watch. They sort of flow from one end of the tank to the other, and they stay pretty tightly grouped. They do spread out a lot. They do their own thing, and of course when food goes in the tank, they all just go nuts in every which direction. But as far as freshwater fish, these are probably the most schooling you're going to find. These and similar type fish. Now here's where the catch comes in. These are not strictly freshwater fish. These golden shiners are fish that can often be found in rivers, but they are also euryhaline animals. They can be found in rivers that are in tidal basins and in rivers that flow into the ocean or the harbor, the bay. So these animals will be found swimming in bays and harbors, which effectively is swimming out there with the big boys in the saltwater, and they shoal. But when they get out into massive groups, and these fish, you know, in the hundreds of thousands, you can find them in the Great Lakes, you can find them in the Chesapeake Bay, you know, in the hundreds of thousands, massive schools of these fish, and they school. So when we look at them here in this tank, even though there's no real threat in there, you can still see more schooling behavior than you will in any of the other fish I have that we often think of as schooling fish, such as the neons or the skirt tetras or the Cories. So I know this was a long-winded look at it all, but the long and short of it is you've got to look at every situation. You know, with my skirt tetra, they're fine, but with my barbs, they weren't. You know, I had to add more barbs back to get the behavior back to community behavior. Another grouping fish that we can look at over here is my rainbow fish. These are another one that will do the same thing. Of course, we're not going to get any sort of accurate look at them. As soon as they see me come over here, they just go nuts in every which direction and bang up against the glass waiting for food. But it's another fish that will at times move very fluidly, like it's a single unit, and then you turn around 5 minutes later and you've got fish in all four corners of the tank doing their own thing like they don't even know the other ones are in there. So this is a tank where I'm not sure what would happen if I only had one or two rainbow fish in there by themselves. Would their colors be bright? Would they be big and vibrant? I don't know. That's a possibility. And if they weren't, I would say, okay, well, these are fish that need to have a group together. And this tank here, I've got to walk around some stuff in the room. Let's get back over here. This tank has my Congo Tetras in it. This is another good example. My Congo Tetras are so big and bright and beautiful and vibrant, it's amazing. Now, I have a friend who had several of these in a tank and over time has lost some, and he's down to 2 left. At some point, I'm going to be getting them from him and adding them to this little collection. But once again, you can see they're doing their own thing. You know, these are tetras. They swim around just like skirt tetras or anything else. But in my friend's case, he has one male and one female in a 60-gallon tank, and his do not have anywhere near this kind of color. His male is about as vibrant as my females, and his females looks just downright washed out. Now, I suspect that is because they are not being kept in a group, and they might be stressed out in his tank, and that could be why he lost the ones he's lost over the last year or so, is because of stressful condition in his tank for some reason. I don't see his tank often enough to really know what's going on in there. But it'll be interesting to see once I get them and we move them into this tank, will they color up and you know, I don't know how much they're going to grow in size. They're already mature fish, but I think the colors will come back. I really do expect them to color up and glow again, and it'll be because they've gotten back in a group and are no longer under stressful circumstances. So, as I keep saying, every scenario is different. Every circumstance is going to be different. You know, look, we got guys down here just kind of hanging out, swimming down the other end. This one's over here doing its own thing. Yet, this is what people refer to as a schooling fish. They're not. They're shoaling fish. And it generally won't be the end of the world if they're kept singly. So, thank you for watching all that. I hope that was helpful. Please leave your comments, questions, concerns, or anything else down below. I always try to get back to everybody if I can. Please subscribe if you're not already. You don't want to miss anything else I've got coming up in the very near future. Thanks for watching this one. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you real soon in the next one.